Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation and respect, the InkGuild acknowledges that we live, work, and play on the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Ganaya, Piikani, as well as the Stoney Nakoda and Tsuut'ina nations.
This territory is also home to the Métis Nations of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Finally, we acknowledge all Indigenous and non-Indigenous to honor and celebrate this territory alongside us.
So, you want to do the recording flip and get ready for the intro, Dean? Because we're going to just start right with the intro and get into it.
Oh, I already did.
Okay.
You already hit the button?
Yeah,
Did you get our whole Jesus Yandaresim on recording?
I got parts of it. At some point I left at some part I left because I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then I just hopped back in like a couple seconds after. But I got most of it.
Oh, the InkGuild gets excommunicated.
Hell yeah.
I'm pretty sure I already
love being charged with crimes.
To be honest, I think I could be excommunicated for my Discord name alone.
What does excommunicated mean? Is it a crime?
The Catholic Church kicks you out and denounces you as a soulless heathen.
Ooh, that sounds wacky.
Once again, I'm pretty sure the things I've put on my body are more than enough for that.
We casually have like the symbol of sulfur on there a couple times, right?
A couple times. One literally etched into the skin, because why not, you know? I've also got the Wiccan symbol for evil and the horned god, so like, yeah.
I definitely wouldn't be welcome in a white church.
The way that cut out.
I want to hear that on TikTok.
That'd be a great TikTok sound.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey there.
Bonjour. My name is Dean, and welcome back to the InkGuild Podcast. Just go to fucking therapy.
Don't correct me. I don't care.
Need to start a revolution.
I'm going to fucking explode if I don't say this by now.
She would challenge them to a double dutch.
I'm going to summon up his spirit to fix all of this up for me.
You didn't have good enough tea and/or comic books, so.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it.
All of them are fucking idiots.
Simply everyone is taking cocaine.
Just say your morning routine.
You're replicant rebate.
I'm so excited to find out if Jughead got abducted by aliens or not.
Boneless.
Is your refrigerator running? Better go get it then.
Hello,
Hello.
and welcome to the InkGuild,
We are your hosts.
the token couple,
And these are our third wheels.
Gabe,
Hello.
Brooke.
Hi.
Lee,
Yo.
Alex.
Hello.
and Dean.
Hi, guys.
And tonight we will be discussing
Sex
love
and
And romance.
We're going to start with some discussion questions and probably move on to a few examples depending on how the night goes. So welcome, one and all. Was that good for your intro? Is that theatrical enough?
It's very cute.
That was adorable.
It's very cringy. So cringe. Disgusting.
You, Brooke!
I mean, when you saw what the username is, you didn't think we were going to do something cringe?
True.
Uh,
You should... Everyone...
Oh, the token couple.
What did you do?
damn, Gabe.
I honest to God thought it said the Tolkien couple.
Oof, that's like extra nerdy, though.
You watch Lord of the Rings with Tyler and Marie-Soleil. They're the ones who are saying the Lord of the Rings facts first and first only.
We've never actually watched Lord of the Rings.
Not together, at least.
No.
Yeah.
We haven't done it as a couple. We both watched Lord of the Rings separately, but we haven't had a marathon together.
Or a Harry Potter marathon, or a Star Wars marathon. We're just not a marathon in group. Anyways,
People still do Harry Potter marathons?
I'm sure.
Yeah, probably.
Awful.
Before we get onto that whole can of worms, so we asked people to prepare a couple of examples. However, we've done a lot of, hey, everybody, look at these examples in recent episodes. So I thought we'd focus more on some discussion questions, using your examples as just that, examples of good things and bad things. I'm thinking we start with the most basic question, and we'll start with romance. What makes a good romance, either full plot or subplot, in media? I open up the floor. All right, I take the floor back.
No, I was gonna say I had a thing. I had my own notes. So,
Did it?
So, I think I'll expand on this later, but I think I want to get like an opinion from everyone else too. So what I listed is a good characterization between the leads, not just their chemistry, but just like who they are as characters. A good and proper time for it, where it's not invasive of the plot. And on the plot, it moves forward. It doesn't stop because of the romance. It just continues to go forward. And because of and the romance isn't if it's supposed to be the main plot, then that's one thing. But if it's a subplot, then it's not the dominating one, or it's not the one that is so annoyingly there. That's what I think good romance is.
One thing I noticed, and this is where your and my definition is going to differ. I could care less if the plot necessarily has to stop so we can get some characterization, but for me, it's realism. Right? I can't stand something that's too campy, personally. But that's basically my only qualification for what makes it good, is if I believe these two characters could actually have a romance.
Mhm.
Everything else is kind of subjective past that for me.
Well, what do you define as too campy then? Or how would you say too camp? What would you say is too campy?
Meet cutes. God, I hate meet cutes.
They're so fun, though.
I like meat uglies.
What's a meat ugly?
Yeah, define?
What's
When
a meet
they
cute?
have a bad first meeting. When
You don't know what a meet cute is, Dean?
No.
What do you mean you don't know what cute
Dude,
is?
this is basic story stuff.
I didn't realize there was a term for it.
Romance story 101. You're the romance. I thought you would have known what a meet cute is right away. You're all about cute.
This is getting heated.
Every couple, it's literally how every couple meets in a rom-com,
okay.
And then he picked up my papers for me.
Oh yeah, okay,
Alex,
yeah,
what
fair enough.
voice was that? Holy shit.
That's my rom-com leading lady voice.
Okay, yeah. See, I never knew that there was a term for it. That's the thing. I know of that situation, but I didn't know there was ever a term for it.
Humans love language. There's a term for everything at this point. But meet cutes and meet uglies are very interesting. I much prefer a meet ugly, personally. It makes it a bit more spicy, a bit more interesting.
It's you're running late for a job interview, so you cut somebody off, or you steal someone's coffee or something because you needed that caffeine, and look who's your boss's secretary. Or the person you're interviewing with is secretary is that person.
So you make a bad first impression.
Basically, yeah. But throughout the story, you resolve that. You actually get to know the two characters get to know each other and find out that they're not a horrible, horrible person.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm a fan of that trope, yeah.
Stole my coffee, dead to me forever. There ain't no meet uglies. This is now a meet you dead. As you can tell, I'm well versed in romance, everybody. But so there's my and Dean's definitions. What does everyone else think would make a good romance plot or subplot? Again, use examples or like just theory-wise, what is good in practice in theory?
I think it's really important to have both of the characters be interesting on their own, but then also be interesting to like watch interact, you know? Like if you have like this character that doesn't exist and then all of a sudden they're around this like one person, I feel like it's not interesting to watch. Like, you know, people are their own people and sometimes you want to see that as well as see them with someone else. Like I feel like if you have a relationship, you want to see like a different side of someone in that scenario. You know, you want it to like reveal more about them as a character.
Yeah, I agree. One of my examples actually on that, because you know, I agree. Like it's good to see how characters are themselves and in a relationship, and I think one of the most recent examples of me seeing that really well is Vi and Caitlin from Arcane. Two very distinct personalities that you can kind of see, like that have had their own upbringings, that they have their own clear characters, and watching them interact together is very interesting because there is a clear chemistry there that is forming between the two of them. They're such, I don't want to say polar opposites. They're both fairly headstrong and independent. But that in turn, like there are similarities as well as differences between, you know, Caitlin being from Piltover and Vi being from the Undercity. Like there's a lot of clear differences and clear similarities that like lets them be just so interesting to watch, especially together.
I have still only cleared the second episode of Arcane, and I'm not going any further just yet. But we haven't heard from Gabe, Brooke, or Lee. What are your all's opinions on what makes a good romance?
Chemistry. I think that's the most important thing for me. Like if I'm watching a romance story play out, and I'm watching two characters, and they're interacting, and the sparks are flying, and I'm thinking, wow, these two should, whoo, and then they do it. Oh,
and then they do it.
They do it
right there,
fast.
We're not even on that question yet, Gabe. Hold your
not do it, but like, you know, I'm watching characters and the sparks are flying, and then like that they actually get together. It's the best.
Okay, so enthusiasm. Never lose that enthusiasm for romance. But you bring up two interesting colloquialisms that we use when referring to romance. We use the term chemistry and sparks flying, but those are very ephemeral terms. How would you define chemistry in like solid, concrete ways?
Okay, I can do this. So, in Star Wars: The Force Awakens, when we first meet Finn and Poe, that's sparks flying. That's chemistry happening. They're speaking words at each other, and the words are being spoken back to them, and they're good. They're good words. They're great words even. And then there's that one scene when Oscar Isaac is like, "Hey, you should keep this jacket. It suits you," and then he fucking bites his lip and smirks at him, and he gives him that like that look that you know that look when he looks up and down his whole fucking body. But then they don't fuck by the end of the trilogy. It's bullshit. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm just trying to define what chemistry is, and that's chemistry. That's science, baby.
You've listed a few things which I definitely agree with. I think one of the big things with chemistry is there's the term I learned a little bit ago, and it's the flirt to roast ratio in banter.
Yes.
Yes. Have a solid flirt to roast ratio. And it can be like a lot more roast or a lot more flirt, depending. But as long as both characters are on the same ratio, that is when I think you have some good chemistry.
That's the best chemistry. That's the chemistry you want. When you got I mean, Dean, you mentioned Vi and Caitlin. That's another good example of that. Because Vi and Caitlin, like for all the scenes when they're very cute and romantic, there's also scenes where they're giving each other shit. They gave each other in those first couple episodes when they're together, they gave each other a ton of shit. In with Finn and Poe, they give each other plenty of shit, but then the aforementioned jacket scene, which is the most erotic display I've seen in a mainstream Hollywood movie in my entire life, and it wasn't even intentional, apparently.
They knew what they were doing.
Oscar Isaac knew what he was doing. You know?
It was all in the actors. It was somebody. The writers had no idea what they were doing.
I don't think Lucas was, but Oscar Isaac.
I was gonna say,
Exactly.
I don't think anyone at Disney deliberately would ever look at that, like, would look at those two characters and think, yeah, they should be gay.
No,
They are
wouldn't.
best friends in the historical sense, specifically the Greek historical sense.
Like Achilles and Patroclus.
Yeah,
best friends.
They're just very good friends.
I'm definitely not going to murder an entire city because my best friend died and drag a corpse around the city's walls for like 3 days. Anyways, sorry. We got historical. Brooke, Lee. Go for it.
So, I think the best romance is the romance that is the hell away from my plot. I really, really, I hate romantic subplots. I always hate them. For some reason, they always hit me fucking blindsided. And lots of romantic subplots are really done very sloppily, very messy. A part of that you guys have already covered with your characters need to be actual characters and not, oh, look, a sexy cardboard cutout for me to just shove into this character plot. But I feel like romantic subplots are so omnipresent in our literature that when people are writing, they kind of just like throw one in because, oh, this is what you do. Or this is how my like shorthand code for everything is happy now because so-and-so got a girlfriend. Beyond that, romances are good when they take the time to actually develop the romance and have it make sense. I also hate it when romances stop when the couple decides to get together or get married or whatever. Because, like, technically, if you like take your romance up to when the person's married, like the rest of their romance is just like the rest of their lives, and you're just ignoring that. Like, the romance should continue after they get together.
I agree. Ali,
I
you remind me of one thing. I think did we see the movie It together or did we see it separately?
Yes, we saw It together, and I was very mad.
When we walked out of It and getting sort of onto the bad romance, coming next. But I remember walking out of that movie with Lee, and she was just furious.
It made no fucking sense. It's terrible. I hated it. There was no point to any of that at the end. I was sitting there in the theater and I was gobsmacked. Same thing with Kylo Ren and like what's her nuts, Rey. I was like, why? There was no lead up. It hit me completely out of like left field. There was no interaction with the characters besides angry glaring on either side of the room and or mutual trauma. And like, no, that's not a romance. That's Stockholm syndrome. But like,
oh my god.
I have strong feelings on
piss off all
romance.
the Raylos tonight. Oh boy.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Finally,
all
I've been
six of
waiting
you.
to do just that.
But a good romance. You've spoken about taking time to actually build it.
Yes. So my favorite romance is probably written by Terry Pratchett, and it's from a character named Moise von Lipwig and Adorabella Deerheart. And it's great because it starts as a meet ugly. Buddy basically makes this person lose her job. And it's worse than that. It's a beautiful little story. But it develops over the course of 3 books. And the first book is when they get together and they decide they maybe want to date. And the rest of it is just them being people and enjoying each other's company. Because there's this like weird trope that I read when I have to interact with romances where someone's like, oh, well, I love them so much, but I will only talk about them when they're gone. And when I interact with them, I just stare blankly at their boobs. Because my writer doesn't know how to interact 2 people having a regular conversation. And yeah, no. Make your characters people and make them have a reason to want to be around each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Bare
that.
minimum.
Fucking,
Yeah.
I hate the trope of like the fucking bad boy trope where he's just mean constantly, and the girl's like, "Wow, he's so hot," and I'm like, "What do you see in him? Get some standards."
I see Marie-Soleil looking at me pensively, and I'm worried she's about to come up with a real-world example.
Not a real world example, but like the example that I was thinking of a couple that's still romantic as hell after they get married. Adam's family. Morticia and Gomez Adams.
Yeah.
They are totally in love with each other. Every moment that they're on screen together, they are gazing at each other adoringly. Like,
Yeah, that's relationship goals right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I wait? Can I just sneak in one last thing that I hate in romance?
Aren't we talking about the good parts?
I was gonna say.
Oh, damn it! Never mind, I'll save it. I got distracted. I was like, there's so many things that are wrong with this.
just like, give us a moment, one more moment, okay?
Yeah, so if I may, I wanted to add on to what Lee said. I think, like, I agree. If it's, I've had a long issue with like romantic subplots, and I can't wait to talk about that when we get on to properly like talking shit about romantic subplots. But just, I think when romance is really kind of at the heart of the story, if it's the reason why I love two character stories, because romance is kind of like, it could like naturally kind of occur that way, and when it is kind of integral to the story and not some subplot to a larger overarching story, then I feel it's perfectly fine. And I was talking about this yesterday's recording, or at least, you know, for everyone listening, last week's in Life is Strange, with Max and Chloe. Their relationship has been developing over the course of the game, through getting closer, through finding out about each other's history, by interacting with Max's powers, but also just by being their own people. The connection there was natural, and it was paced pretty perfectly, and in a very interesting non-linear fashion either, because it explores different parts of their goings on while looking back into the past, sometimes literally, and that really is the kind of main story around it. Because for those who haven't played Life is Strange, I guess spoilers for episode 1, you are introduced to Chloe by her getting shot, and over the course of the game you learn just how integral Chloe has been to Max's story, and at the heart of it there's always been like chemistry and connection there. And whether or not that develops into romance, like canonically, it's definitely does, because it's just cute, and it's the main focus. That's what I'm trying to say. It's the main focus of the story. There's no bigger overarching thing that is trying to take these characters away, because it is their relationship that is the big overarching story.
Would you say that Life is Strange is a romance game? Or is it a subplot?
I think yeah. I think I would call it a romance.
Moving ahead, Brooke, what to you makes a good romance plot, slub plot? Slub plot, go ahead.
Mess up the English language.
Everyone has those days. Non-toxicity. I am frustrated by this point with the amount of toxic relationships that are romanticized in media. So to me, what good romance is people who can be friends. And I feel like that's like the fucking baseline, and it's not even shown enough. Right. I love a good enemies to lovers trope.
Enemies to lovers trope?
Oh, yes.
Yes, like I love enemies to lovers. But when they get to that lover's point, they are now friends. They are confidants in each other. They don't manipulate each other. They shouldn't be manipulating and toxic to each other. And the exact opposite of the enemies to lovers trope is the best friends to lovers trope, which I love. because I like that closeness in people, that connection that doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be giving to each other in, like, you don't have to go smoochy. You connect.
That is
I
one
all
thing.
of this.
Yeah, and like one thing I kind of want to talk about when we get to bad romance is the idea of you lose the friendship when you become lovers, but like a sign of a good romance is that stays. And an example I can think of would actually be Kim Possible.
Yes. Ron and Kim.
That had a build up.
Mhm.
Seasons and seasons worth of build up, right? But anyways.
I also liked in that one where like when Ron and Kim got together, like the school supported them. They didn't make fun of them because Ron wasn't cool. They had support. But anyway,
Even the characters who were like typically cast as like who were like the bully characters were like, fuck, finally.
yeah,
Took you long enough.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is that everything we wanted to say on what makes a good romance plot / subplot? All right, then. I'll ask what we've all been waiting for. What makes a bad romance?
Love triangles.
Wait, love V's?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
speak of love triangle in a bit, but yes, love V's.
Yeah. Could I open this then? If that's all right?
Sure. Go for it.
I fucking hate love V's. I think especially in YA because a lot of it is just so like hastily thrown together and not really genuine. I think like and I'm gonna bring up some examples like potential like later on, but just God, I hate them so much. It suddenly becomes the central focus for all of the characters, and especially in YA too, like fantasy YA, like fantasy YA, where there's bigger shit happening. I've talked about this before. There's bigger shit happening in a fantasy YA. Why the fuck are you now worrying about who you're sleeping with? I'm pretty sure your readers don't care. I certainly fucking don't. So please, just not this. Move on, and then yeah. So love V's.
It's about stakes, right? Like there are bigger stakes than your romance subplot, but authors seem to forget that, or they seem to think that the audience's only stakes are the romance subplots. At least it's the perception I get from reading YA.
To be fair, I also think that this could in part come from like fandom culture, which tends to be very ship focused and romance focused. So like I'm not saying that writers should embrace it because I think it's fucking awful and they're like listen, if someone's trying to destroy the world, who your main character is sleeping with doesn't fucking matter. I'm sorry. It doesn't.
And like oh sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Just like it's like I think this is just gonna go back and forth a lot, but like something that I think works in that scenario is if you have like an established relationship and like, you know, the characters are overwhelmed and stressed, so they like go to each other for like comfort and stuff. I think that's really nice. But it's like, you know, oh no, someone kidnapped my mother. Which boy should I sleep with? Hee hee. Like
No, this solves the problem. I don't see any problem with this. What do you mean? That's how I'd solve the problem.
Oh my god, we're in the middle of war. We need to blow each other. Okay. Sorry, that was kind of random, but just I wanted to say just I can also kind of see why it is that a lot of love V's tend to be emphasized so much because it's a very easy conflict to rely on. The protagonist has two people that they very like care and love dearly, and the choice in itself is so stupid that I'm not even going to speak on it, but just like that I think is what makes that so interesting, especially in a world-ending scenario where everyone may be at risk, and you eventually have to, where your main protagonist is likely trying to protect everybody and can't do that. They have to choose one. Like it's a lot of very familiar things that we have come to expect from Love V's, but at the same time, it's that kind of like investment in characters and thinking about the characters, because they could be very good characters, but that kind of conflict around Love V's is so familiar, and it doesn't really feel fresh anymore.
Can I talk about another trope that I hate that I think is kind of an extension of this?
Sure.
Yes.
So the example that comes to mind is something I don't know if any of you have watched. There's this anime called Uta no Prince Sama. And the main character is this girl, and it's like a reverse harem anime. So all of the main male characters are in love with her. All of them like tell her this on a regular basis, and she's just like fucking oblivious to it. She's like, one of the guys will be like, "I'm in love with you," and she's like, "What? What do you mean? What do you mean?" And he's like, "Never mind." It's so fucking annoying. It's so frustrating. Harem anime, reverse harem anime. I know this stuff kind of crops up in other stuff too, but those tend to be like the biggest things. But like just that trope of like, the girl that everyone's in love with and has no fucking idea.
Yeah, I hate that. It's so annoying at this point. Like, do you not hear these things? Like, even in a story where plot kind of just keeps everything a secret until it's eventually revealed later, like, in reality, you would know these things.
It's like, at what point does a romance plot become fan service? Because again, that's kind of what it is wish fulfillment. The idea that you're wanted by so many people as a main character, whether it be harem anime or Love Bees or anything like that. It is kind of wish fulfillment, no doubt about it, right?
You can make it less annoying though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Brooke, what do you think? What's a bad romance plot trope?
I guess I kind of already touched on that with the whole toxicity thing. It's like most romances are just very toxic and manipulative. The one that kind of pops into my head immediately is Age of Adeline, because I went into that being like, cool, this lady don't age. And then it was literally just a boring romance, but the way that the romance starts is him literally like manipulating her into a date. And I was like, this is romantic? I'm sorry, what? Scoozy? I don't appreciate.
That's a trope that I've seen. I call it like the power dynamic trope, when somebody can hold something over the other person's head. It's like, I think we all hate on 50 Shades of Grey, where he literally buys the company she works for, so she becomes her boss.
Yeah.
I hate that man and those books, and
yeah. And then there's the I hate that I'm going to say this out loud, but the alpha omega kind of trope. It's not just in fan fiction. There are actual public books where people are like biologically designated either alphas or betas or omegas, and you have a biological hierarchy that just like, ugh.
There's lots of shit men who believe in that. So.
Or like the whole like mate. Like this will come up when we get to Sarah J. Maas stories later. But like the whole like fated like mates and like fated things like that.
When the only reason these two people are involved is because they are destined to be together.
I hate that trope.
Yeah.
Like it's not as romantic as it sounds, because I'm like, it feels like there's no choice involved, And I think that's a big part of why it's like the trope of girl in arranged marriage runs away, meets guy, falls in love with him, and then realizes he was the guy she was supposed to marry, kind of appeals to a lot of people, because it's like they were destined, but they still chose each other in a way. And it's like, it's just when romances lack that choice, like when you don't feel like both characters actively choose each other, it feels really like uncomfortable and gross.
Well, a note of that is, and maybe we'll get into this further on a couple other topics, but the idea of consent, maybe being important in a relationship.
Yeah.
Just say.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to yell this episode, by the way, but there we go. Consent's important. Always ask permission. Don't be a fucking asshole. Continue.
But like, yeah, that's what it is. It's like when you feel when characters are destined to be together, they don't consent to that. They're just told they have to be, and then they're like, well, I guess we don't have a choice.
Twilight. Looking at you.
I fucking hate Twilight. Anyway.
Could I bring up one?
We haven't heard from Gabe yet, or Lee.
Okay.
Bad romance. Yeah, honestly, I feel like a lot of the things that I would have brought up have already kind of come up. I mean, the love triangle thing. That's a real annoying one. Really, just like not even usually love triangle. You know what? Okay. Oh, you know what really feathers my bird. I don't know. Feathers my rooster. Is that one of them? You know what really eats my ass is
not on that part of the episode yet.
That sounds pleasurable, Gabe.
Do you know what really?
Get on.
Do you know what I don't like is
what?
Oh, I forgot what I was.
You get distracted by Gabe.
Oh my god!
Not even just the love triangle, but like when there's like. This is a super specific one, and I think it's a branch of toxic relationships in fiction stuff. But when there's like a really forced third fake romance interest, where it's not really like treated like a love triangle, where it's like an actual like there's an actual romance happening, or there's like a perceived romance happening by one of the members of the romance subplot, and then they're like, ooh, you're stepping on my girl, or you're stepping on my boy, and while that isn't like really happening, I just find it's very silly. It's always like it's like a love triangle without even like development or there being an actual romance. It's just basically just jealousy and toxicity, but it's like it's usually played for laughs, which is and in the context that it usually pops up is really weird.
I see exactly what you're. I know exactly the type you're saying. That kind of like slighted male friend when the female's showing interest in someone else and always gets all up in arms and aggressive. You're right that.
Yeah. Like you like oh stop on my girl.
You're well practiced in that, Gabe. Is that the bedroom voice I've been hearing so much about?
Listen. I'm great at voices. Any one of them could be the bedroom voice, and you'll never know.
I hope
voice
it's
is
Davy
actually
Jones.
the Davy
I
Jones
hope
voice.
Davy is your. Yeah, I hope Davy Jones is the bedroom voice. But moving on.
Lee, you had a bad romance point you wanted to make.
Okay, so I feel very passionate about the subject, so I will try to keep this concise. Someone already brought up communication. I hate idiot plots in romance. I hate it. It's my least favorite thing in the existence of the universe, because there reaches a point when you're like, you're just not that dumb, sweetie. You're just not that dumb. Please tell me you aren't, and if you are, maybe like work on your people skills. Another thing that really, really bugs me is in romances, and this was kind of touched on by Gabe, is there's an almost proprietary sense that is played between lots of the characters. So like, oh, you're in a romance with this person, so now as a writer, I'm never going to show them apart again because they're a duo and they're the like battle couple or whatever, but they will never be apart ever again because now they're not allowed to be their own characters because they are the two prime pieces of this romance. And that is something Yeah, I hate it.
Also,
And it's something. Go, sorry.
also possessiveness. Like
Yeah.
one of the characters, usually the man, but not always, if it's straight, is like, oh, don't talk to other men or blah. So fucking common, so fucking annoying.
Mhm.
It is really an annoying trope. Bland characters. Sorry, I have like an entire list of. Also, the end of the book is coming, so there's a quick everyone pair off moment.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
I hate
Oh.
that.
So this was
Rick
one of my
Riordan.
personal topics, but we can totally talk about Pair and the Spares as well if you want to bring that up.
Rick Riordan. I love you, Rick Riordan. Stop doing this. Not everyone needs to be in a relationship at the end of the story. I promise. It doesn't need to happen.
Especially when you sacrifice character growth for the relationship.
I think this plays onto a wider problem in fiction, which is the idea that every single character needs a satisfying ending. And going back to what Lee said about the end goal or like the reward per se for a job well done on the main quest is getting a girlfriend/boyfriend. The idea that a relationship is the most satisfying ending for these characters. I think that's the big overarching problem with the pairing the spares issue.
And the idea that you need like romance or a romantic partner or a sexual partner to be happy in life, which is just really damaging and something we need to talk about on a societal level.
Can we also talk like because there's a subgenre of that trope, and you're right. Because I hate it. I hate when the plot of a romance is so and so doesn't want to have a relationship and has staunchly not wanted to have a relationship for, like the last 50 years of their life, but now Joe McGee with the giant biceps and the nice chin comes in and suddenly their life is fixed magically because now they want romance. Which like is a really weird thing because like it's every Hallmark movie ever. And the only fulfillment that the lady love interest gets generally is once she's in a romantic relationship. And I really hate that. I hate how much romances and romantic subplots boil down people and characters to nothing else but romance. Because there reaches a certain point in a poorly written romance, and even in some of the well-written romances, where nothing else is important to that character except for that one person. And I feel like it detracts. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That's a matonormativity.
Yeah. And it's something I generally really hate in fiction. And yeah, no. Also, the subplot where the villain of your romantic comedy or your like bad person is someone who will have sex with people but won't enter a romantic relationship is a trope that I find very strange. But moving on to my next one. The no reason at all besides this is also pairing the spares, but like has anyone read the Icewind Dale trilogy?
No.
No. Okay.
No. Damn. That's a bit of history you got there.
Yeah. Shh. I read books as a small child. I probably should not have. But there's this for the first 3 books. There's a relationship between like our barbarian named Wolfgar and like this random archer named Canterbury. And someone is going to pop up from the 90s and come murder me for getting those characters in such small boxes. And they are randomly thrown together for no reason. It turns out to be a really awful, toxic relationship and terrible things happen. But then like a couple books later when they break up, one of the characters is just like, huh. And I'm pretty sure this is the author being like, I kind of messed up, guys. And being like, the only reason those two got together is because they were kind of equally pretty and kind of equally important. And I hate that. Just let some people not have romances.
We have a leading male, we have a leading female. They must get together to satisfy the heteronormativity of the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more before I'm going to hand it off to Tyler. We talked a bit about like the soulmates destined to be together, and there's a kind of related to that. I don't like the one of the people has this condition or supernatural like thing, and you are the exception to this. Like, there's a book series, and it's an adult romance series that I read, where the woman, she has this ability that she can hear every conversation that has ever taken place in the room she is at, except when she is around her love interest. For some reason, being around him mutes all of the other conversations, and she can have peace. Or in the same series, you have Paris, who is bound to the demon of lust. It canonically has to fuck a different person every night, or else the demon will take over and he will go on a rampage and just rape people. He's never been able to get it up for the same person twice until he meets this one woman who is on like the evil people's team, and she dies literally the next day, like moments afterwards. And then he can't get it up unless he thinks of her.
Wow.
I hate that. I hate that the exception. You're the only one that can make me a sane person kind of trope.
Wow.
So the thing is, I think I have seen this trope done well, but I can see it. Yeah, I mean, this is also just Twilight too, fits into that. And I can see that being done really poorly, really easily a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. It's such a bullshit thing too. Just like the whole, oh my god, you're the only person in the entire world that can do that can help save me. No, have you ever heard of a therapist, bud?
Yeah.
I love how Canadian you went there, Dean. You ever heard of a therapist, bud?
And then I also really don't like how true love trumps all kind of thing. Like, I've talked about Alice in Zombieland before, and there's an ability some people have where they can wipe your mind. You forget everything. That happens to one of the main characters at one point, and because her boyfriend and all of their friends shove a bunch of memories in her face, pictures and stories and everything, she suddenly remembers her entire life. However, earlier in the series, it's mentioned that a woman has her memories wiped and she forgets her daughters and ends up abandoning them. So you're telling me that a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old's boyfriend is enough to bring his memories back, but a woman's daughters aren't enough to bring hers?
Yikes.
Yeah, that 16-year-old horny really is powerful. Anyways.
Tyler.
Hi. Dean, you were actually you had something that we cut you off on to let other people talk, and I want to give you the chance to say it, so go ahead.
Oh no, it was just something that it was something that was already mentioned before. It was the thing. It was the like love can save me thing. Hate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's one of my bad romances. And it's kind of because it's become overly done in media, and it's a strange thing to overly do. But I'm just gonna say incest. Can we not incest bait?
Can we actually talk about this for a minute?
Yeah, please.
Like,
prevalent.
It's really weird how common this has become in the last decade. Like fucking Cassandra Clare, Sarah J. Maas, I mean Game of Thrones, Riverdale. That's just like brushing the surface. I know there's more. Like there's so fucking many of them, and I'm just like, where did this trend come from?
To be fair, it's kind of always been here. What we need to do is get rid of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
So, to speak on Game of Thrones, and again, I'm a huge dark fantasy buff, obvious by my proclivities and plenty of things, but there's a huge inherent shock value in dark fantasy, especially with sexual trauma and plenty of other things, which we might get into later if we decide, but I'm leaving that up to the group if those are things we want to talk about. But Game of Thrones is old, a lot older than people think.
The books were written, I think the first one was like early 90s or 80s. Someone will have to correct me on that because I'm not going to bother to look it up. And so that's fine. That wasn't nearly as prevalent then. But especially with YA, it's becoming worse and worse. And the whole forbidden love idea does not make a good romance. There are times where there is something in the way of you two having a romance, and guess what? That means you probably shouldn't have a romance. It doesn't mean you should try harder. That's problems.
Like, if you're gonna think of like forbidden romance, when I think of forbidden romance, like the way that I'd like for it to think of forbidden romance is if like like if it's like addressing class, like you're from a poor house, I'm from a richer house, we can't have this romance, it's gonna mess everything up. It's like socially forbidden because you shouldn't be associating, like, if you're rich, you like associating with the poor is like reflective of your image, and if you're poor associating with the rich, that could be a nice elevation thing. But even then, like exploring that kind of forbiddenness of that's safe and fine. And like there are a lot of different things that you can explore with the word forbidden. You just shouldn't make your stories outright fucking disgusting.
And that's one thing I'm glad you mentioned, the idea of like the social class being a barrier to forbidden love. You're right, there are some barriers in that regard. The very best forbidden love story is fucking Romeo and Juliet, and that's because our parents don't like each other. That's a fine reason to rebel against them. That's perfectly normal. And you know what? Kind of healthy and cathartic. But there are some things that are barriers for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, like what you
Like
saying
teachers?
about Thrones.
Yes.
But just
I hate the
can
teacher.
we finish this and then jump into that?
Yes.
But like Game of Thrones, I agree with you that like, I mean, it is older, but then also like the shock value. But one thing that I think, like a reason that I don't hate it in Game of Thrones is because like I feel like it's not presented as like a good thing, like the plot of the story like hinges on people discovering this because it's a secret for a reason, and if people find out, that's bad. That's why Cersei keeps like having people killed, like, and so like it explores the idea of it being a dark, like fucked up thing to do, whereas a lot of like YA books at the moment, Cassandra Clare again comes to mind, is not exploring that aspect of it, but it's instead like, oh, what if you had a hot brother that was in love with you? Wouldn't that be so sexy and forbidden? It's like, no, it's not. Stop. Go get help.
Get help.
Go to therapy.
Moral of this
Get help.
episode: get therapy. And on the note Lee was saying, yes, the teacher-student issue is pretty prevalent. I find it's also especially prevalent in Japanese media. Just
Literally, okay.
Looking across the sea there.
I started rewatching Cardcaptor Sakura, which is an anime that I hold very near and dear to my heart. But so far, there have been 3 separate teacher-student romances in it, and I'm just like, can you stop? Can you stop with this?
It's fucked up, and again goes back on what Marie-Soleil was saying about power dynamics, which I believe she has some points to make on as well. She brought up 50 Shades of Grey, but I want her to explain, because she was talking to me about it earlier, how male and female power dynamics work in modern romance.
So a lot of the times and it's often in heterosexual relationships, the male character will be older. He will be more wealthy, successful. He will have a better job or a career. He will also be more experienced, to be this like he's had more relationships, or he's just more sexually experienced, or more like adventurous in his sex life, whereas the female character is more naive, she's younger, she's less experienced, she's more vanilla, and none of these things are bad things. But in combination with this man, it's not a level playing field, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, even with, like, in Twilight, Edward is a very controlling man towards Bella. Like, and not only him, his entire family. Alice literally sees visions of her and keeps track of her and Bella's goings and stuff to keep her from doing things that they don't want her to do. Even when Edward decides he doesn't want to, he's never going to be with Bella, when he thinks Bella dies, he's like, okay, now I'm going to go commit suicide.
I think, like, and speaking on 50 Shades of Grey, even though we'll get into to sex scenes and stuff in the next couple topics, the idea of BDSM relationships, as someone who's pretty experienced in the culture, it's healthy, and there are healthy ways to do it, but I believe that the common media doesn't understand that.
No.
And so when they're trying to do these dominant style relationships with either the older man or the more experienced or the wealthy man, and let's be honest, in most modern media, it's almost always the man. Very rarely will you see that script flipped, and that needs to change as well. I think that'd be a very interesting story to tell on the inverse. They're unhealthy. If you would look at that in terms of a real life BDSM relationship, those are red flags.
In 50 Shades of Grey, and I haven't read the book fully, I've read synopsises and such, there is a scene where they are setting up a contract for their relationship dynamic. He actually gets her drunk. Like, she has a couple glasses of wine before he brings out the contract and has her sign it. And she signs it basically under duress too, because he says, if you don't sign this, we're done. I'm not going to be anywhere near you again, like, kind of thing.
I mean, sounds like a deal to me.
Anyone who knows any bit of contract law also knows that any contract signed while one of either party is not in the fully right, sane sense of mind, including alcohol, is a null and void contract that will not hold up under any law.
And also, I'm pretty sure I've heard of contracts actually written up in BDSM relationships in real life. They're not actually admissible in the court of law.
They're not.
Of course not.
Not supposed to be.
No, it's supposed to be an agreement and in words between two people that's just putting the discussion on paper so that there is no way that you can misinterpret it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by signing it, after you've had a couple of glasses of wine, you're not in your right mind.
Everyone remember the rules of BDSM: safe, sane, consensual.
Risk-aware kink.
Yeah. Here's your disclaimer for what we might be moving on to next.
What makes a good sex scene?
If we want to move on and everyone's done with romance, obviously. We were just talking about BDSM, so.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do
Get her
it.
done.
Oh, God. Stop saying it like that, people.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
Gabe, you've infected them?
What?
So I did put a little side discussion question coming up a little bit after, but there are different types of sex scenes. And so, like, if a good sex scene is a type of sex scene that you prefer, like a fade to black or something, definitely discuss that if that is your preference of sex scene, because I think quite a few of us are going to have different opinions on this matter. But I open up the floor. Someone rattle off.
I can kind of expand on something Dean said earlier, which is, I think, unless like the focus of your story is the romance and like the sex is part of that, or if like, you know, sex is like the point of the story, even if there's no romance involved, then it's fine. But if the point of your story is like, if the romance is a subplot, if the sex happening is like a subplot and it's not really like contributing to the story, then like it's annoying to read.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you're gonna have a sex scene in a story, I think it needs to be necessary to some extent.
Yeah, and I have an example of that.
So an example of a good one?
I'd say so. So it helps kind of progress the plot along as well as address the motivations and the flaws of these two characters, and that is from BoJack Horseman when Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane sleep together after Mr. Peanut Butter is in a new relationship. And this is not me condoning cheating in any way, just put that out there, but near, I think in, and spoilers for BoJack, but close, like in season 5 or 6, if I remember correctly, Mr. Peanut Butter has entered a new relationship with a pug person, Pickles, who is a waitress, and that was coming off of a recent divorce with their with his previous fiance, or with his previous wife, Diane Nguyen. And I believe the context was they were talking about like their recent divorce, and eventually got into a shouting match and then slept with each other. And as awful as that act is, like morally that's a giant fucking no. It actually kind of plays into it doesn't just progress the plot along for obvious reasons, but it also just plays into like the characters' motivations. It also just plays into the characters themselves. Mr. Peanut Butter has always been a very happy-go-lucky character, but at the same time he has had pretty terrible relationships, and hasn't really come to understand the crux of that problem, which is inherently himself. He's too distracted. He doesn't really pay that much attention, and when he tries to, it's never really listening to his partner. And in the case of Diane, who is trying to, rely on herself and, trust in herself more rather than just be a pushover, then they find that confidence in each other for a time, but eventually as they grow apart, they have had like a lot of what that sex scene does is reinforce something that was called back to earlier in the series, when they had friction as fiancés and as husband and wife. I think I remember in earlier seasons there was Mr. Peanut Butter was trying to run for governor of California, and Diane and him were so heated, and they were always like, and they got into shouting matches, but that always resulted in angry sex. And that unfortunate kind of thing, they like the show writers didn't just forget about that. Ultimately became one of their flaws. There was still a mutual attraction between the two of them at the time, so it's just, I want to say that it advances like the plot a little bit more, because now there's more conflict, especially for a character as kind-hearted seemingly as Mr. Peanut Butter. But it's also a good example of just like playing into like how these characters think and operate. And on the sex scene itself, it was like really quick, which is how sex scenes personally like I can stomach. I don't like the gratuitous details.
So far what I'm getting from Alex and Dean are that a sex scene should be pertinent to the plot. Right?
To the plot, or like to establish like, characterization,
character motive as well. I would hazard to group in there.
Yeah.
And I have my own opinions, and I know mine are polarizing. And to extra polarize my own opinions, I want to hear from Lee.
Why, though? Okay. So, honestly, I don't necessarily mind any form of sex scene in a book that I can flip past. If you ever have the pleasure of reading a like comic books code comic where sex is implied, and they have a whole bunch of like weird pictures of a train going through a tunnel and a gun being unholstered and weird shit like that, that's hilarious. And I find that quite entertaining for the entertainment value. But what makes a good sex scene is if there's no dialogue that's really important to the plot, so I can generally skip through it if it gets weird and gratuitous. But also like something that I don't, because sex scenes aren't my thing. I generally will skip them.
Getting that sense, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I realize that novels are their primary job is to entertain people, and so like yeah, if you want to be a writer that does that in your book, you can put it in your book. Yeah, sure, whatever. But there should almost be like a delineating factor so I can just skip through them. I honestly, I'm more ambivalent towards sex scenes than I am romance. Like I would rather a weird gratuitous sex scene in the middle of my book than a strange subplot that is a strange romantic subplot. And also, one thing, choreograph your sex scenes, please. There should not be 7 different hands in this scene, please. No, honestly, like if I read your sex scene and I have no idea what the fuck's happening, that's a bad sex scene. So, good sex scene, because I realize I'm straying off point and leading us into the bad territory once again, like I did with romance.
So
Everything is autonomically possible. It's entertaining to at least someone, I suppose. And there's choreograph, so I'm not suddenly reading a book and then bam, there's a sex scene. Because like that happens a lot to me. Maybe it's because I just don't pick up on the cues or whatever. But like there's a lot of times I'm reading a book and I see no chemistry between these people, and then bam, they're either in a romance or bam, they're either having sex, and I have no idea how they got there.
So choreography and lead up, almost foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to be able to avoid that shit.
Yeah.
So-
sorry. Could I just
No,
touch on
go
that
ahead.
real quick? So yeah, to agree with what Lee said, yeah, just pacing, just it's pretty. It should be just like a standard thing. Like, don't just do things because you want to do it. Like, have some kind of motivation or arc for your characters to eventually get to that point. Like, if they're gonna if you're starting with 2 different characters in a meet cute situation and your goal is for them to get married, just everything towards like getting from point A to B should make some sense pacing wise. Like you can have like if they're just so in love with each other that they get married within the span of a few months, okay, everything in between then should make sense. If they're trying to wait if they're trying to wait for a little bit, then like if they're trying to wait before like, you know, they're comfortable having sex, since we're talking about sex scenes, just explore why. There are plenty of reasons as to why, like in real life, people aren't so like, people either rush into relationships or like take their time with the relationships, and that also just counts for sex because that's a very personal thing. Like you shouldn't always just force that kind of thing just because, you know, like just because it can be unexpected or it's something that, you know, someone likes out there. Like you take your time with that shit.
So, I think, at least, the polarizing opinion on the end of this. Firstly, the idea of plot in sex scenes. We've had 2 kind of opposite opinions. Lee doesn't want plot in sex scenes because then you can't skip them. And Alex and Dean, it seems like you at least want sex that's plot relevant, not necessarily that has plot details in it. I have some interesting opinions on plot in sex regardless, but I want to bring up one really good example of a sex scene that is based off of the euphemisms, because we've talked about fade to black or using train tunnels. Thank you for that image, Lee. But The Wise Man's Fears by Patrick Rothfuss, which is the 2nd book in the Kingkiller Chronicle, our main character loses his virginity to basically the fairy queen of seduction. Great book. Fantastic book. This sex scene was one of the best I've ever read. Why? I didn't know they were having sex until they were lying in each other's arms afterwards, post-coitus. And I had to go back and reread it to realize what was happening. It was that sneakily well designed and euphemismed that it tricked me. And I loved that. I loved every second of that. Now, they go on to have a few more normal encounters. But for a first time introducing sex into a series halfway through the second book, God, it was good. Patrick Rothfuss is still prolific. He's fantastic. I'm going to kind of touch on the next question of what type of sex scene is best and why. And I think it's very important to be based on the media or the genre that you're a part of. And here's where I'm going to touch on Westerns, because I used to have a big Western kick. Western is kind of known as its male power fantasy, with often sex being part of that. And it's usually fairly descriptive. There are times it does euphemisms or times it fades to black. But I've read a Western where there was no sex scene. And I'll be honest, by the end of the novel, I was like, I feel like something's missing. I feel like some integral part of this story is missing. And I look back and I realize, oh, there was no sex scene. So at a certain point in Western media, it became a staple of the genre. And I find it's a similar thing with sexual trauma relating to dark fantasy, that it has to be there or it doesn't necessarily feel like dark fantasy. And this may just be my own personal bias and the things that I've read. On a very interesting flip side, I think most Westerns having sex scenes is good. Even if the sex scene itself has nothing necessarily unique about it, for some reason it adds to the story for me. And I've even got an inverse. I've read a Western that was a female-led Western, which is very rare in the genre. And they had a sex scene in it, where she was the dominant party as well. And I thought that was fantastic. And it still kept with the core tenets of Western. And that even made me realize further that a part of the Western genre is, yes, sex scenes are allowed, but even so, it has to be a main character dominant sex scene, because it, again, espouses that sort of power fantasy that Westerns relate to. There's my little bit on Westerns, because I find them a very interesting genre in general, especially with how historically fucking inaccurate they are, all for the sake of gunslinging fantasy. But what makes a good sex scene for me is a lot of the time you can either be a horny fantasy or you can be realistic. And I find that as long as you waver to one end or the other, you're going to be fine for me. Personally, I prefer full-on descriptions. I like to see authors use what they've got and prove that they know their subject matter, as opposed to, say, euphemisms or fade to blacks, which to me feel like cop-outs a lot of the time. And so on the realism end, to have a realistic sex scene is something I very rarely see, but enjoy every time I do. Things don't always go right in sex. And more to the point, especially first times, you're not going to have a fantastic, mind-blowing orgasm the first time two characters have sex, even if one or more is usually pretty experienced. It takes some time to learn the moves and the tricks together. It really does. And that type of realism is something that I find really adds to it for me, but I don't see it done very often. So that's my spiel on good sex scenes.
See, I don't think that's that polarizing, though.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. I definitely think that the type of sex scene and how much sex is in a story definitely is affected by the genre. Like, when I'm reading YA fantasy, I don't want sex scenes because, one, usually the characters are like teenagers or like barely adults, and it's just kind of uncomfortable. And two, there's usually so much else going on that it just doesn't feel necessary. But yeah, there's like certain types of stories where you're like, yeah, I want the sex scene, I want the details. And then other times where I'm just like, no, just a fade to black is fine. It's very dependent on like what I'm what media I am consuming.
I agree.
And see, that's one of the interesting things. Like I said, in thinking about this whole episode, I'm like, sex scene is kind of dependent on genre in a strange way.
Yeah. If you're doing a rom-com, that's when you can be like it would just make sense. Like if you're doing a rom-com between like two people in their late 20s, yeah, you can be descriptive, or you can just use euphemisms, or you can just be pretty straightforward. Like it's fine in that context, but yeah, like it's like to agree with Alex too, yeah, in YA fantasy, like I've said before too, that I like in a YA fantasy, when you have so much interesting lore already, like you have different machines, different like potential machines, you have like beautiful landscapes, really interesting characters to explore, why the fuck do you need to write in a sex scene? Like, no.
It goes back to like, it depends on the genre. And
Yeah.
if you're going to be reading a romantic romance novel, especially an erotic romance novel, you're going to have sex. And like I'm not entirely sure if this is by author or by publishing house, but like there's almost a formula of how many times these characters are going to have sex and why they're having sex. Like there's a series I've read which in every book they have sex twice. Like the characters will have sex twice. The first time it's more about just emotions, it's sex for the sake of having sex, and then the second time towards the end of the book is more detailed, more expanded on, and it's more about their feelings and showing their love through having sex. And
I also feel like if you're picking up a romance novel, you're picking that up because you want the sex, you know? Like you're going there for that purpose. Like you're not gonna pick up like a romance novel and be like, oh my god, why is there a sex scene in this, you know?
Yeah. You pick it up knowing that this is going to be in the novel. It's different when you're talking about YA novels when the characters are like 15 and 16 or something in that age range, and these are children.
Mm-hmm.
Like these books are for children, and while we do, like, I think statistically, a lot of the times, at least in the United States, kids are having sex around 16 is when they start having sex. Statistically, I think. Realistically, it varies. Like I didn't have sex until I was like 21, but that's not the point. The point is, if you're going to pick up a book, you kind of need to know what you're getting.
Yeah, that's why I think there are genre expectations, you know. That's why like you'd expect a sex scene in a romance or a western. And the thing is, if we're talking about like YA books specifically, I don't think it's inherently bad to have implied sex in YA books. But I tend to be of the opinion that you don't want like full on kinky sex scenes in books meant for teenagers. Like I think a fade to black is just fine in that scenario.
Yeah. And I'll follow that up with an example from Shadow and Bone. In the books there is implied sex. And it's not like it's not so jarring and descriptive that it takes you out of the book. It's really just a few lines, then it's the next morning. And that's fine. Like you already kind of know and spoilers for Shadow and Bone, but you already kind of know that Mal and Alina love each other deeply, so you don't really need to think otherwise, that like, yeah, this is going to lead to that. But at the same time, like, you don't have to describe it, because there's a whole other plot going on. Like there's a whole like world-ending plot going on. That's priority. In that moment, it's like, for them it's just being with, it's just those two characters being together. You don't have to be any more descriptive than that.
All right, well, we've gone off on this for a minute. We got two other people to talk to. Brooke, Gabe, sex, yes or no? Good Christians or not? Evil sinners, maybe?
Good Christian, no. Do I enjoy sex in books? No. I'm a fade to black girl. I don't pick up books to get good sex scenes. I'm picking them up for the plots and what's going on. Because like I tend to read science fiction, fantasy, dystopia, stuff like that. And I do think that there is an overabundance of sex in books, like almost an addiction. Half, it's like the majority of book talk is all about spicy books. And it's like, that's not what I want to read. That's not what we should be aiming for. Like, they rate books super fucking low if they don't have spicy scenes. It's like, if you want spicy books, you should be finding books that are specifically spicy. Not every book needs spicy scenes to be a good book. And it's making me really angry, actually, that there's such an emphasis placed on sex. And it also takes away from the romance building of characters, because they use sex as a way to drive the romance instead of actually building the chemistry between the two people. And it's really fucking annoying. If I want sex, I will go read fan fictions, because fan fictions can have some really good juicy dripping sex scenes, and it doesn't fucking matter about the plot. The plot isn't there. But I'm picking up books to read a book, not sex.
I've got a question then. Since we're talking about good sex scenes, you've said you're a fade to black girl, but now you've just told me that you really like fan fictions with good drippy sex scenes. So please define for us what's a good drippy sex scene.
Okay, well, with the one, Jesus Christ, wow, this is very uncomfortable to talk about. Listen,
Would you like to pass?
You don't have to, dude. If
you don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to.
I thought you were getting heated about a certain subject, and I did want to hear your opinions on the matter. But if you wish to back out,
well, I am very heated because I don't like seeing just an abundance of sex in books that shouldn't really have an importance of sex, especially because, like, yeah, like the things that I'm reading are YA, like. Oh god.
Wait, are you saying that like people rate YA books badly if they don't have sexy scenes?
Hold on. Someone speak?
Hello?
Hello?
Okay. Sorry, my Wi-Fi was super fucky there for a second.
Okay, got it.
I asked, are you saying people are rating books like YA books badly if they don't have sex scenes?
Yes, like I see so many people who are like adults who read a lot of YA and yes, new adult. So YA and NA, but they'll rate them really lowly if they don't have spicy things in them. And it's like, can we stop putting an emphasis on spicy things? Like, I really like Mary Lou's writing style. I kind of follow after her. She's one of my favorite authors. And she does not have fucking sex scenes in her books, but you still get romance and you still get like implications of stuff happening and whatnot. But there was a book series that I read when I was in junior high that was like I Am the Weapon or something like that. And it was literally a 14-year-old dude. And there was so much implication on him just banging hot chicks. And it was like, can we, like, I'm all for healthy sex education and just, you know, letting teens explore and do what they want to do. But adding so much of it, like emphasizing it so much in media is damaging. It does create like porn addictions. Like I do consider it a porn addiction if people won't read books that don't have sex in them. Like there comes a point where you have to look at it and be like, you're kind of addicted if you can't read a book that doesn't have this explicit content in it anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I do agree, and I'm glad we've talked about like the societal implications of it here, because that's a very interesting thing to get on. Still kind of want to hear about those fan fiction scenes you were talking about, but I'll leave you be on it for now. Gabe, what makes a good sex scene?
Honestly, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I don't actually like sex in books. I mean, I don't really read a lot of romantic books at all. I don't read a lot of romance, and like I don't even read like a ton of YA. So like I don't think I've read like a ton of YA books that have had like spicy content. But like I think I'm pretty much in the same boat. I think like sex in like non-erotic fiction can get really great. I mean in a previous episode I have very vocally spoken my thoughts on sex in fiction in a clip that Dean has put in memes. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the thing about sex in fiction. You don't need to have a fucking sex scene. Sex scenes are irrelevant and useless. And I know we're talking about romance subplots, but what the fuck? All romance subplots lead here eventually. And that's a whole reason that fucking so many writers want to do them, is because writers want to have a bunch of sex scenes. They want to have a sex scene in the fiction. They want to have characters be horny. But guess what? Sex scenes are boring and uninteresting. Because guess what? Everyone's fucking done it. Everyone knows what the fuck is going on there. You know what not everyone knows what's going on there? Is a fight scene, or an action scene, or a chase scene. There's so much shit that you can accomplish with a more interesting scene that you choose to do with a sex scene. Just to be a fucking horny on your keyboard. It's stupid and useless. Because guess what? If I was horny, I'm not gonna go to my fucking bookshelf and peruse my novels. I'm gonna fucking go to the internet if I am in the mood and I'm done.
But I will repeat what I said there, and I'll repeat it now. But in like a less goofy way, which is basically that, like, I think sex in fiction is a lot of the time it's used as like the emotional catharsis of like a romance subplot. And I just think I think there's way more like creative things that you can do in a fiction story to give emotional catharsis to like to you know, not to use this word hilariously, but the climax of a romance subplot.
How long's the recording going on for, Dean?
125.
We have made it 1 hour and 25 minutes without using the word climax. Congratulations, everyone. Gabe, how dare you break our record?
I'm using it in the actual literary word of the climax.
All right, continue on with your climax.
Oh, I'm making a point here.
Continue.
I think that sex can be used in. I think okay. I think my thing with sex is honestly that I think it's fine. It's totally fine in an erotic book or erotic fiction, because like that's the idea. That's like what you're there for. But I find a lot of the time in like non-erotic fiction, when there is a sex scene, it's like, yeah, I find it super one note, honestly. So I mean, like, okay, I guess like a good sex scene would be a sex scene that isn't one note and actually does manage to like do something unique and interesting that develops the characters involved in like a neat way, and isn't just, oh well, you know, we're nearing the end of the book, and these two characters, they've been developing the romance. We need to really drive it home that they've had a successful romance. So they have to have sex now. It just seems, and a lot of the time in stories when that does happen, the sex is like, it's either really weirdly gratuitous or it's written in such a way where it's like there might as well have not been a sex scene. It's just, you know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. So we've had quite a few opinions on this. I have two examples from one book series. However, one of the examples touches on some very mature content warning for sexual assault and rape. Is this okay if I speak this example, or is anyone gonna bow out? Because I do not want to bring it up if some people are uncomfortable with it.
I will for the video's end, or like for the video's end and for audio only, I will leave the timestamp that you can skip to, or I'll leave a warning about this.
Okay. Anyone present, want to not discuss this, because I will cut this off at the nub. It's an interesting example for me, but we do not have to discuss it. Anyone want to veto? Okay. So it's a trilogy called the Bobby Dollar series. It's a very interesting urban fantasy, which is basically a Christian mythology noir. And the first scene I wanted to talk about is our main character is an angel whose love interest is a demon. This sounds really YA and cringy. Trust me, it's not. These are very adult novels. Each demon has a specific physical attribute based upon their
sins in life. And our female characters' sins relate to drowning and cold, and her skin is constantly ice cold. And when we get to the sex scene between them, it references that a lot. And I think it's very good to add in, remembered world building for your sex scenes, just as a first good example. The second example I have is the worst example, which comes in the second book. And this is unique and stands out in my mind because it's the first time I've ever seen something like this happen, where our main male protagonist is pretty brutally raped by a female demon character. And he doesn't get too crazy gratuitous with it, but he definitely doesn't shy away from it. And it adds to the character because it now has provided a trauma response and motivation for our main character, which does come up progressively throughout the rest of the series. But I thought it was also such a subversion because of how power fantasy, the noir and urban fantasy genres are, that it kind of tipped the scales into dark fantasy, and even then flipped it on its head for me. It's why it stands out. And that's one thing about using sex scenes, and what Gabe had said is what prompted this in me, is the idea of them being one note. I can tell you damn straight these sex scenes were not one note because it subverted it really hard into a way that a lot of readers were made uncomfortable reading. I was uncomfortable reading it, but that was the point. Anyways, there's my heavy content discussion over. Shall we move on to what makes a bad sex scene? And I'm sure we all have some very funny examples and whatnot. So I'm going to give it to Marie-Soleil to start us off.
So I'm going to start with, it's not necessarily the sex that was bad, but it was how the sex was used that was bad. Sorry. In Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there are two moments that come to mind where sex is used badly. Where the first one, on Buffy's 16th birthday, she sleeps with Angel and he loses his soul.
Wow, that's some heavy Christian allegory, isn't it?
If you don't know, for those of you who don't know, an Angel is a vampire who was cursed to have his soul returned to him, as vampires don't have a soul, they're demons. But he would regain his soul when he felt a moment of true happiness. So at completion, during sex with Buffy, he loses his soul and goes on a rampage, threatening everyone she loves. I don't know if I don't think I have to explain why I don't like that example of sex. And then there is another moment in Buffy the Vampire Slayer when she is older and she is at college, and she and her boyfriend are basically having a sex marathon in his room at a fraternity house. And I guess the fraternity house was once a group home for troubled young women who were abused by the woman who owned it, who ran it. And so the energy from Buffy and Riley's sex brings out the spirits of these traumatized children that reside in this house to turn the house evil, and it's attacking everybody else in the house.
Yikes.
Wow.
Oh my god.
I don't remember that part.
Wow.
If you're gonna if you want to have a healthy relationship in a show or a book, but you're going to demonize sex, you're doing it wrong. At least that is my opinion.
Mm-hmm. May I go now? That's all right?
Yeah.
Or did you want to expand on that, Marie-Soleil?
I mean...
Or, expand on any more examples.
The only other, I can think of another example that's a so-so example, but, it's when... Because when you're reading a book and it's from the point of view of one of the characters having sex, and they are the more experienced person, and when somebody says, I don't want to do that, but the other person is like, actually, they said this, but I knew they really wanted it, kind of thing. I don't. That's just. And even if the other person likes it, like, it sets a bad precedent for the idea of, like, while you're having sex with somebody, you might know what's best. You don't need to listen to them if you know what's best. I don't. Yeah.
Bad.
Don't demonize your sex if you want it to be a healthy relationship, and have healthy communication in your sex. Next. Who's next?
I can. That's all right.
Yeah.
Do it.
Okay. So I've listed a couple of bullet points and an example that kind of best explains everything that I've said. So what I've listed down as bullet points for a bad sex scene is if it's completely gratuitous, it's rushed in, doesn't make any sense, ruins the characters, and there was no emotion to begin with. And what better an example of a sex scene that encapsulates all of that than Manon and Dorian's in Empire of Storms. Fucking hate that scene. I fucking hate it.
So much.
Yeah, like I'm sure Alex and I and
Is this the one?
It's not the A Court of Frost and Starlight one.
Okay.
It's not that one.
I'll get to that. Don't worry.
Yeah, Alex will cover that. But for me, I'll cover this one. So, it's awful. It's so bad thinking back on it in hindsight, and it goes over everything else, or it kind of goes over everything that I was saying. So completely gratuitous. It is way too descriptive for a young adult, even for thing like. I don't think the Throne of Glass books by Empire of Storms were young adult at that point anymore. Like, they became part of new adult, but still, holy fuck, that is way too much. Like the two of them under the thing in the bow, in the ship, Manon is tied to the boat, and Dorian just comes in. There they are fucking. No.
She's literally tied up. She's literally their prisoner.
Yeah.
When this happens, like, they've tied her up. They don't trust her, and the thing. Okay, when I read this scene for the first time, I got so fucking mad because the thing is, like, I don't. First of all, Manon is a lesbian, but since the author seems to disagree with me, I will say I don't hate Manon and Dorian as a couple. I think they could have worked. The issue I had with this was she was trying to imply that they were, like, almost, like, super in love with each other when, like, do you disagree with me with that a statement?
No, I agree with you, and I'll expand on that thing. I'll expand on that.
It's just like she seems to be, like, trying to be like, oh, they're in love when they've met, like, twice at this point. Both times Dorian was not himself, to say the least. And then they just, like, she's being held prisoner in their ship, and he goes down and he uses his magic hand to pleasure her or whatever. And you're just, like, sitting there going, you had the opportunity to build up this relationship really well, right? Like, both of these characters have just gone through, like, some of the absolute worst shit in their lives. Both of them are in horrible places in their lives. It would be so easy for Dorian to just, like, wander down there and be like, oh, look, someone else who's going through some shit, and have him, like, sit down and have the two of them talk and, you know, relate to each other and be like, oh, wow, we have so much in common, blah, blah, blah. And, like, build this relationship up. It would be so easy, but no, she had to fucking speed run it and be like, no, they're in love, they're having sex, it's great. No, it's not.
Might I say, I love the idea of speed running a sex scene in a book. Like, what are your speed run strats? Do you have a world record time on this?
They had sex done.
Done.
Also, I mean,
so okay. Just I'll let Alex, if you want to cool off for like a second because holy shit, you went off, dude.
This is the thing in those books that like pisses me off more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And we haven't
Pretty
even
much.
gotten to Akatar yet. This is just Throne of Glass.
I just want to say one thing. If you really, really want to write the whole captor has sex with their prisoner on like a pirate ship kind of deal, that's actually a trope in a lot of erotic novels, and you could probably make a lot of money on just that. Why do you gotta stick it into something it doesn't belong in?
I have
Why do you have to stick it?
I have a theory
Oh.
that Sarah J. Maas is literally just putting all of her kinks into these books and hoping no one will notice. The amount of but like the amount of like biting, there's definitely like an Omegaverse kink going on without saying it. There's like I think there's low-key a pregnancy kink. We'll get to that. Like
we'll get to it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Like literally, and I'm like, these books are intended for teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Go write if you want to write erotica, there's nothing wrong with that. Own that. Go do it. Stop putting it in your YA books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, just to kind of like expand on what Alex was saying. Yeah. Just going back to Manon and Dorian. Yeah. It's bad. It felt rushed. Like, to expand on what Alex was saying, Dorian was a character that was introduced in Throne of Glass, technically because that was the first book, but then in Assassin's Blade he was mentioned, so he was a character long established in the canon already. Manon was introduced in Heir of Fire, which is
The
two books. Yeah, it's 2 books after Throne of Glass. They meet each other in the next book, Queen of Shadows. And then suddenly they're saving each other. They're saving each other in the beginning of Empire of Storms, and then they're fucking near the end of Empire of Storms. I mean, talk about fucking Sonic levels of fast. Holy shit! I can't believe that. That's not possible, and that makes it that is way too rushed. Alex is right. There could have been interesting potential for two characters who are, for lack of a better words, like down on their luck and needing company and support from people, like from 2 characters who have lost a lot. And that wasn't really the focus because there was kinky sex to be had. And at the same time, like, it doesn't make any sense. Why the fuck would they fuck in the thing anyway? Like, maybe it's just how I always saw Dorian, but I never would have imagined Dorian engaging in that kind of like quote unquote activity, especially.
That's the other thing. This scene is so out of character for both of them. Like, Dorian is like, I genuinely think that Dorian and Manon are some of like the best written characters in this book, this scene aside, because like you have Manon, who's like super like strong female character, but not in an annoying way like Aelin. And she's like she's a very like dominant presence. Like, she enters the scene and everyone's aware of her. Like she has a presence. She doesn't take shit from anyone. She's like,
Sorry.
Okay. But yeah, she's like, she's for lack of a better way to put this, she's a top, okay? And Dorian is not like he's not as like, he's a very like passive dude for the most part. A lot of things just happen to him. He doesn't take a lot of like control of situations. And like, that's not a bad thing for his character. And so one of the other issues, I have so many issues with the scene, but one of the other issues with it is that Dorian all of a sudden is just like this big dominant dude, like, oh, I'm gonna make you feel good, you're gonna do what I say, and Manon's all of a sudden like, oh, he's so hot, and they're just like, where did their personalities go?
I know.
Love YA protagonist voice, Alex.
Yeah, Alex, you've really been stepping it up with the voice acting this episode. Good on you. Or like the voice impressions, yeah, but just to like I agree. It's so bad. It changed their characters like overnight, I think. Like somehow overnight. I didn't think that was possible, but just
It's like a straight up 180. It doesn't make any sense.
yeah. And when
especially because like neither of them, especially Manon, is not very trusting. So even if she were to like show her vulnerable side or whatever with Dorian, I would not happen that fast. I'm sorry, it just would not. Based on how she's written.
That fast, holy shit! Like you would like if Manon were to be trusting of a character, maybe it would be like talking a little bit more about her vulnerability as like a Croakan witch. Not fucking betting someone you only just saved a few hours ago. I don't even care if it's a few hours ago. I haven't read those books in forever, and I'm not going to.
Well, we've heard quite a bit about Sarah J. Maas, and Alex, I hear there's another example that you want to give, but I think we should get to that in a bit. Gabe, you have an example or any what makes a bad sexy scene? All of them?
Men writing them.
Men writing them. I was wondering when we get to this topic. Go hard.
I don't know if I can go hard. I this isn't like. So again, I haven't read a lot of books with a whole bunch of sex in them, but I have seen the posts on the men writing women hashtag, and oh boy, those are interesting. I have never seen the word boob used as both an adjective and a verb so many times on one board. It's insane. I don't really know how to elaborate. I'm more just opening the table for the discussion of men writing sex scenes, because this isn't a topic I'm super versed in, but yeah, I'm more just opening opening this subject into the arena.
Well, Brooke, Lee, I know you've both touched on what makes a bad sex scene to you, but is there any elaborations you would like to give or any examples you wish to discuss?
Haha, I was muted. Yeah, story of my life. I do have, I don't think I have too many mechanical things that make sex scenes bad. I covered them already with, if I can't tell how many hands are involved in your sex scene, it's a bad sex scene. Also, have you guys ever read the Sword of Truth series?
No.
Don't.
I watched the show, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there's this weird part in... I read this such a long time ago, and it's literally an entire part of the book that is a long, protracted, almost sexual assault scene. With with Richard, the main character, and this literal female assassin torturer cult. And that happened for an entire quarter. And I think this is the reason why I hate when plot is involved in sex. Because in order to understand the rest of the book, you had to read through that bit because important things were happening. And it wasn't good. It wasn't entertaining. It just was very uncomfortable. And I'm pretty sure it was just the author's kink on display. So the thing is, I understand if you're going for a sex scene that is uncomfortable, because that's part of your book, but this came out of nowhere in a high fantasy series. Just out of nowhere, Buddy got kidnapped, and then you're like, what did I just read? So, yeah, that is one of the things that makes a bad sex scene. Another one is there's a few tropes around sex and romance, and they kind of entwine each other a lot, where suddenly someone has sex and then they go from being a snotty teenager to a full-blown woman or something like that, right? Because that is an established trope. And then there's the whole like you find your humanity in someone else's penis or the magical healing cock, right? Which are just like
or the reverse, yeah.
Oh yeah,
or
the
woe
reverse.
is me, I've lost my humanity. It's in that guy's dick. Holy fuck.
Or yeah, because like here's the thing. Normally that trope is that girl's vagina. Because quite frankly, like sex and romance are used as a huge signifier of this person is really has a soft center and they are actually still have some humanity. When really it doesn't show it in any other aspect of it, and that's a trope that I really hate.
Fair.
Yeah. Also, if you guys ever want a hoot, look up the Bad Sex Awards in fiction.
Yes, they're very funny.
They are amazing, and I think they're exactly what Gabe was talking when he was saying men writing women. A little bit. Because I dramatically read some to Tyler yesterday, and like, whew.
It was
I don't want to do it on podcast, but like, next level bullshit.
gratuitous. I don't think these people have ever seen a naked body before.
Well, what's the one you sent not that long ago? That was really horrible.
Couldn't say. Don't flash it on screen now, Dean. I think it'll scar some people, I'm sure.
It scarred me. It was horrible to read. I hated that.
Brooke, I know you've touched on a few things that make bad sex scenes before, but are there any other elaborations or examples you wish to give? Because I think the next example is going to get heated.
I mean, I brought up fanfiction before, and fanfiction is very... I mean, a lot of books are also hit or miss with that thing. They can be very velvet wrapped steel of them, and... Yeah, don't like that kind of shit. It's nasty. I don't like anything that has to do with rod or member flower.
For everyone in the audience, can you tell who's read a Sarah J. Maas book?
Thank you for the psychic damage.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
It'll get worse, trust me.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think like with fan fiction, when it comes to bad sex scenes, I certainly can't excuse a lot of it, but for the fan fiction that I've read that had sex scenes, I think there's just a certain level of like expectation that you kind of get with with fan fiction versus like official published works. Like with fan fiction, it's likely just someone posting their story up on Wattpad. They edit it maybe twice, and
dude, why are you reading your fan fiction on Wattpad? That's not where you get the good stuff.
I'm giving an example. I'm sophisticated, Alex. I read it on AO3, and I don't read fan fiction. Just anyway. Okay, look, I still have to fucking edit that one Shadow over an Arendelle thing that we didn't, or that we read a long time ago. Anyway,
I was just looking on AO3 to see if there had been a new chapter. I was just.
I mean, Alex is following that story. If there was a new chapter, they would tell us.
I would tell you. I'm eagerly awaiting a new chapter.
Yes.
I want it so badly.
Yeah. So, anyway, just like back to my point, like if someone is just posting up their story on Wattpad, like you certainly don't expect a certain level of like polish with them, because they're likely just going off of what they know, right? And community feedback helps make them better, but it's still not the professional board of editors that professional publishers go through every single day. Like they have multiple people who are like going through their stories, not just doing grammar checks, but style checks and content checks. It boggles my mind that it passes through some of the shit that I've read from Sarah J. Maas, for example. And I'm not just trying to shit specifically on Sarah J. Maas, but like very graphic, very very visually specific scenes like that, especially sex scenes. it amazes me that no one in the editing room at all is always like, hey, Sarah, this is too much. Put this back.
I genuinely think once authors like get past a certain level of success, they stop editing, their work stop getting edited as much. Like the amount of fucking typos and like grammatical mistakes in Sarah J. Maas's books at this point is honestly ludicrous. Like you can't tell me that anyone's giving those books more than like a cursory read through.
So look at a manuscript. Oh, it has Sarah's name on it. Okay, publish it now.
So, before we get further down on that train, I just want to say on what makes a bad sex scene, in my opinion, because I do like sex scenes in literature specifically. In movies and stuff, I could really take it or leave it. I also don't consume much television as it is. Anatomy is important. Obviously, Lee's already touched on this, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But then another point of it is there's the moment of writing what you know, and this is a common topic. And there are things you can write about dragons and stuff. No one knows about dragons. But you can do some research on common themes. If you're going to write a sex scene and you don't know what certain things feel like or what they do, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should stay away. And not to get too graphic, but I've heard orgasms or read orgasms described in so many ways that I'm like, have you never done this? Like yourself? Or if it does feel like that, maybe you should go to a doctor.
Hey,
just maybe.
Tyler, if I were to tell you that two characters in a YA had sex on a beach and one of them climaxed so much it started making the water boil, would you believe me? Would you believe that the writer knew how sex worked?
If, like, maybe they were some form of superhero with heat-based powers? But, like, you're on a beach. Let's say you're even having sex in the water. Firstly, you're having sex in salt water. Yeah,
For 6 hours, I'm pretty sure.
For 6 hours, yeah.
For 6? Huh?
Listen, okay, the Fae in Sarah J. Maas's books literally have like dick magic where they can just get hard again immediately. I'm not joking.
But again, that is kind of what makes a bad sex scene for me is if you don't know how it works. And yes, there's some element of fantasy to it. There is. Hell, you could even add literal dick magic if it's within the rules of your fucking system. But write what you know. More importantly, know what you write. Especially when it comes to what is one of the most universal experiences of humankind. My thoughts. We've heard a lot about Sarah J. Maas, but I think we're going to go off a little bit more because I was getting inklings of an example that you were going to talk about, Alex. So feel free to go the fuck off, and then tertiary topics
Here
to
we
get
go.
to.
Wait,
that's it.
Okay, wait. You know what? No, I'll just let Alex go.
No, do you have a precursor to this?
I was gonna ask, who here has never heard any of us refer to the scene from A Court of Frost and Starlight before?
This is mostly new to me.
This is new to me.
I've definitely talked about it before. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast before, but I've talked about it in like the chat before. I literally found a PDF of this book online and found the scene.
The scene.
It is always.
Are you getting a
the
dramatic reading?
I'm not comfortable reading this out loud, to be honest. We can do that afterwards if you're that curious. But like to start off, I'll say I have a lot of issues with how the romance between Rhys and Feyre is portrayed in the court books in general. Considering, he kind of, breaks her arm and then tortures her with it in the first book. But that's romance, I guess. So like this book, this is the fourth book in the series. I think it's technically considered like a novella. I don't think it is. I think it's too long for that. But it's kind of like takes place after the first trilogy where everything is like calmed down and Feyre and Rhys can like settle into their not quite married life. A little bit of context. At some point in the series, Feyre receives a vision from someone, I don't remember who, about what her future child will look like. In this scene, Feyre and Rhys are getting it on in a cabin in the mountains, I believe. And basically they've just decided to live their whole lives together as if they hadn't already done that, and as if the story hasn't been written for them to have to do that because they're mates and it's fated, whatever. Anyway, so they start having sex. It's like there's lots of talks of like galaxies and shattering, and they're making the pictures fall off the walls. They literally break a vase because they're going at it so hard that it falls and shatters. Like, it is ridiculous. Anyway, Feyre reaches her climax. It's great, I guess. And also, I guess I should have mentioned this context before, but like Feyre and Rhys have this like mental bond where they can communicate telepathically. After she climaxes, she reaches out through this mental bond to Rhys and sends him a picture of their future child. And this is what causes him to climax.
I want to make a joke. I can't make a joke. If your mate or male partner climaxes from you showing them a picture of your son, run. Run very fast with said child.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I'm pretty sure the implication is supposed to be like, they're getting ready to start a family and this is their first try at having a kid together. And so it's so exciting, but just like...
Oh, an implication. I wonder what the implication was when Feyre blew Rhys on the battlefield.
It's just like she literally shows him an image of. It's not like an "oh, I'm so excited to have a child with you." She literally shows him their child, and that's. Don't do this.
Speaking from, a regular human perspective, and I'm not even going to say a male perspective. I mean, a regular human, as much as I am that. If anyone gets off to that, therapy. Lots of therapy.
And prison.
Potentially prison, yeah. Is Sarah J. Maas in prison? Because that might explain some of this. Or maybe she should go to prison because of this.
It was a choice that was made, and like I really had no interest in continuing the series after this, aside from like idle curiosity. But I read this scene and I was like, yeah, no, I can't support this woman anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Wildin'.
So yeah, that's the scene.
What was that one thing? If we're talking like, I know we aren't like thing. This is kind of relating to one of the characters from ACOTAR. Isn't there one character who just like slept with a bunch of men, and yeah, so who I'm talking about.
Very broad category to list.
So
but
let me specify.
There's this character in the book. Her name is Moore.
Mm-hmm.
One of the like male characters in the story is like super into her. She does not reciprocate at all. It's very clear. But she goes around sleeping with like a bunch of other men. And then in the third book, you find out that she's a lesbian who is sleeping with men because she doesn't think she like, I don't even remember the reasoning at this point. Like, she's like, I'm not attracted to men. I prefer women. But she's like sleeping with men so that like the guy who's in love with her doesn't try to keep pursuing her or something. And also her family is homophobic because why not? These books.
So much in that one sentence you just.
Well,
You kind of hear it over and over again, and it's still news to you.
I mean, if I'm ever not appalled by hearing about these, then there's something up. But, moving ahead. We've talked a lot about bad sex scenes now. Anyone have any more closing comments on the matter?
Can I mention one of my favorite, funniest bad sex scenes that I've ever read?
Go for it.
In the Mortal Instruments series.
Oh no.
Oh boy.
Oh, no.
No.
There's this scene in one of the like later books in like the second trilogy where your like main 5 characters, which is Clary, Jace, Alec, Izzy, and Simon, are going on a rescue mission to rescue Magnus, Alex's ex-boyfriend who he's still in love with, who has been kidnapped by his father, who's a demon. They're in this demon realm. They've just been attacked by a bunch of demons. They're hiding away in a cave. Jace and Clary kind of go off on their own down this branch, and they decide to have sex for the first time, and which is already hilarious. But the real cherry on the cake is that Jace pulls out a fucking condom, and you're just like, dude, why do you have that with you?
It's a part of the essential demon hunting kit.
Those demon hunters, they fuck.
You never know when you're going to go up against a succubus and you're just going to be like, eh.
Oh my god.
Do you want a condom if you're sleeping with a succubus?
Yes? Oh my god, yes. Do you actually know like the lore behind what a succubus does in Christian mythology?
Well, I mean, I know that they want the stuff. Or
So like random sex mythology from Tyler here. There are 2 brands. There's a succubus and an incubus, female and male. And what happens is they're used to create more demons in that the female will go and sleep with the man to catch as much semen as possible, deposit it in the male incubus, who will then go and have sex with the mortal woman to create more of them. Because they can't actually reproduce properly. So yes, I want a condom if I'm fucking a succubus.
Okay, you know what? That is fair.
Anyways, random demonology with Tyler. It pops up once in a while. Mortal Instruments. You will always have a special dark place in my heart for
They're so
how you
bad.
fuck with so many things.
They're so bad.
I need thing. I have all the way up to City of Lost Souls. I told myself that I was gonna burn them or do something with them, and you know what? For the record, I don't know if that counts as some kind of legal trouble. So I'd like to preface that was a joke. Or I'd like to say that was a joke, but I need to put myself through them to see just how bad they really are. Because I've only read up to City of Ash.
Why would you first Riverdale, now Mortal Instruments? Why do you keep doing this to yourself?
Okay, you don't have to.
I know I don't have to, and you know what? Riverdale was a whole god thing. It just Mara and I should not have put each other through that, but like, because like Mortal Instruments, I definitely think Mortal Instruments. I at least just want to like reread the first book.
It's bad. It's really bad. Anyway, we can move on.
Slightly off topic with the Mortal Instruments. I did enjoy them back when I was an edgy teenager. Now as an edgy adult, I find them a lot less satisfying. But moving on, we've got a few tertiary topics we can talk about. We've already discussed different types of sex scenes in our own examples. I have the question at the end of the document there that we're not going to discuss. We've already discussed romances as their own form of literature enough. But the additional pseudo topics, one of the ones that I want to bring up is alternative romances in media.
which we do not see a lot of. And the one that I always reference is polyamory in media.
Yes.
Usually when you see a polyamorous or sexually adventurous person, they end up being a villain or turning good when they're made monogamous, because monogamy is the end all, the be all as a, Christian Western ideology. But that's something I would like to see more. Specifically, I would love to see a true love triangle where there is a female who is dating two men who are also dating each other, like an old French menage a trois. That would be fantastic. I would eat that up.
Yes.
But that's my bit on alternative romances. So it's kind of a section of like, what is something you would like to see in romance and or sexual media that would get you to like it or would interest you? And again, I'm just opening the floor with anyone who has an idea.
Base thing. Start letting your characters consent first before doing activities. Don't just immediately think. Don't just immediately just start it. I think have a moment where your characters acknowledge that they're about to do something very personal and be like, "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" And then when they've given the go ahead, then do that. Because media is a very influential, movies, books, it's very influential. So just start implementing that. And I think that's maybe not that's kind of unrelating to thing, but I just had to say that. But in terms of alternatives, then yeah, I'd like to see good depictions of polyamorous relationships.
Yeah, I'm also on board with that. I also think this is kind of going into the next topic as well, but I'd like to see more separation between sexual and romantic relationships because they're not always the same. And on that note, more relationships with asexual characters and aromantic characters who might be an asexual person in a romantic relationship that doesn't necessarily have sex, or an aromantic person in a sexual relationship that doesn't necessarily involve the romance, or queer platonic relationships which are considered about the same level as romance but without the romantic stuff. More aro-ace representation in general is great, but I think they have very unique relationships sometimes, and I would love to see that depicted in media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the last points are kind of grouped together. I should say, speak about what you want in this section. This is the very open floor section.
Mm-hmm. To kind of go off of what Alex said with Ace Rep, I'd like to disclose, first of all, I am not Ace, so I don't know how much ground I have to speak on this, but I felt that the conversation around asexuality in BoJack was actually pretty good. And again, if anyone's seen it, then they can more than happily verify it for me. But just again, spoilers for the thing, but Todd Chavez is Ace in the show, and he is a very he's a very caring character. He's a very selfless character, and him coming to terms with his asexuality is one thing, but also just the encouragement from other asexual characters from the show is a really nice thing. It's a really nice thing to show, because not many people understand asexuality, and to show it in a very in a very encouraging and community driven way, the fact that there are other ace characters that are just chill, and they are very open to talking about things aside from just sexual relationships. That's awesome. For a pretty popular show like BoJack, that kind of platform allows a good healthy space for discovering sexual identities like asexuality to thrive, because it's not ever kind of unnatural. I think it's all very thing. It's so chill, but very important still, because they don't like shed lightly on it either. They don't shed lightly on it either. It's just they're being respectful about it. The showrunners, I think.
I haven't seen it personally, but I've heard it's good representation. So
yeah. And again, I can't speak as someone who is ace, but like for me, I thought the discussion around it was good. It helped me learn a bit more about like asexuality, and was overall like a pretty like in my opinion a good like way of representing it, because it wasn't unnatural, like I said.
In that case, Gabe, Lee, Brooke, any alternatives, any things you want to see in media coming about relating to romance, sexuality, sex scenes, etc., etc.? Any closing
tentacles?
I was about to say, I want more monster fucking.
Boy, do I have a genre for you, Brooke. Boy, do I have a genre for you.
I was literally, as soon as I was gonna say monster fucking. I am so excited.
Oh my fucking god.
We need to normalize monster fucking.
Absolutely.
The one thing I didn't bring up in the whole good sex scene, and I regretted it as soon as I finished talking, was the Mass Effect franchise. You know why the Mass Effect franchise sex scenes are good? Is because 90% of the sex you can of the sex in that game is with aliens that look like velociraptors and have tentacle faces, and they have skills and shit.
You really are a Garrus stan, aren't you?
I am a Garrus stan. Garrus is my favorite. I either Garrus or Tally every playthrough, no matter what.
Right,
we need more monster fucking. I have an actual argument for this. This isn't just because I think monster fucking is awesome.
that's just a small part of it, right?
But
that's a fucking sentence.
I'm ready for the spiral. Go.
Okay. So, the reason why I actually so the human sex in Mass Effect, it sucks. It's shitty and terrible because it's just usually it's the player character and then another human character and they flirt and then guess what happens? Oh, they have sex? Oh my goodness! But usually with the alien sex in Mass Effect, there's some whole story behind it. You need to with Tally is a great example. In order to complete Tally's subplot. That's a medical condition. Subplot in Mass Effect. You have to learn how the Quarians do law. You have to become a lawyer and stuff like that. And also, there's alien biology. There's tentacle stuff. Brain, alien. There's one species in Mass Effect. They're like psychics and they have sex through the brain. We need more of that. If there was more of that, I would read way more books that had sex in them, because this is the whole reason that I said that sex is one note. It's not, and now you brought up a good argument for why they're not always one note, and I agree they're not always one note, but a lot of the time they can be one note, and that's because nothing can happen. I think when I first did my original rant years ago about sex in fiction, my whole thing is that I don't think anything like new can happen in a lot of sex scenes. I mean, not can, but a lot of sex scenes, nothing like new happens. And whenever I'm reading a book, I want to read stuff that's like, oh, this is new and wacky and crazy and interesting and shit that's unbelievable. And if I read a sex scene, I'm like, oh, are they gonna start having sex? Oh, are they gonna finish having sex? Oh, that's crazy. Oh, what a curveball! But then when you get a monster fucking in fiction, that's when that shit goes fucking crazy. Because then you can start reading it and you could really be like, what the fuck? Where did tentacles come from? Why do they have psychic powers? Why are the claws coming into the play? They got raptor teeth and they got fucking Garrus has a bird face. What's happening there? Rant over. We need more
All
monster
right.
fucking.
I will slap this one time and one time only. Animals cannot consent.
No.
Done.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need to know. So, Brooke, besides tentacles, any closing bits? And then Lee, any closing bits?
Well, I just kind of follow after Gabe's thing, but I do want to very, very clearly specify. Reality of anatomy. Let's just think back. Does everyone the Animal Crossing? I'll just assume. Yeah, people know the Animal Crossing. There's one little clip where things go where don't go. They shouldn't go there. That's my big problem with a lot of thing that exists is it doesn't work. One time book was raving about Ice Barbarian. They're schlong. They don't fit. But in the book they do, and it don't make sense. That's the one thing I don't like. We can't have it too big. It don't work like that. No impaling up throat, thank you.
Jesus.
I don't know if it was for anyone else, but Brooke for a little bit there was very stop-start.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. I didn't want to say anything. So
God,
it
that
just
was
really,
so
yeah, Brooke. I couldn't.
I-
I got barely any of what you said except for Anka and Schlong.
I
Yeah.
heard Animal Crossing and then I'm like, okay, I know what you're talking about. But then it just proceeded to stop-start every other point afterwards, and then schlong, and then I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
I think we have a new comedy clip that we can put into the episode intro for Brooke. That was fantastic.
Oh, wait, so y'all literally only heard Anka and Schlong?
I heard
love
the
to
Animal Crossing,
everything.
Anka, Schlong, don't fit.
Oh, and I heard
damn it.
throat impale.
I heard, up throat impale. Impale up throat. I'm
So
sorry.
what I'm
That is
hearing,
frustrating.
is we need less realistic sex scenes, aka
No. This is exactly the thing I was not arguing. No. Opposite.
more realistic sex scenes that make sense. We need both of them simultaneously.
What I was trying to argue was yes, monster fucking. No unrealistic schlong up throat fucking. Did that come through?
Yeah, that did.
What a
talking
fucking
about now.
What a fucking sentence.
Hey, what I was trying to say was the Anka video, the one scene where things go where they shouldn't be going, because that's not how anatomy works.
Which one are we talking
Yes,
about? That
no?
video, there's a lot
Right.
going on in that video.
All
You
right,
don't have to
so-
specify,
Yeah,
actually.
It's
I just
not
wanted
that
to
bad
put,
of a
like, second.
video, but like the ones,
I do. I think I know.
Yeah.
The
I
bend.
understand what Brooke is saying, and I want to summarize it in English. Extreme penetration, typically through animated porn. Is that about right?
Yeah, I guess y'all missed my Ice Barbarians bit then.
I heard barbarians.
I heard barbarian.
Okay, I was trying to specify on the Ice Barbarians novels that book talk a bit because their schlongs, which is where I be the size of the whole woman. Like they're too big, but they fit somehow. That completely takes out of the. I can't because it don't work.
They're the size of the woman? Hold on, what?
Like they're very big. They're very big. I can't deal with that in sex scenes. Like they're too big. It's like that. I can't picture that because it don't work. So I don't want that in stories. I'm off a monster fuck. That needs to still, be compatible. The anatomy still needs to be there. We don't actually want literal impaling of the organs and death.
I am super excited for the Bad Erotic episode, everyone.
Oh, no.
I am so excited. Moving on. We're running on a bit long. Lee, anything you would like to add? And then Marie-Soleil does have a closing point, and I think we'll be good.
less unnecessary romance in my action adventure plots, please. That's about it.
Yes. Action is good, not that action.
Yeah, I'm here for explosions. That's literally
And-
all.
Lee, I'll addendum on yourself. Less romance and horror, because I know that pisses you off beyond.
Oh yes, actually, you're right. Thank you. Less romance and horror. If I'm here to watch like terrible people go crazy to Eldritch Being, that's what I'm here to watch. I'm not here for that and then 50% of, oh, I want to kiss you, but there's an eldritch monstrosity. Yeah, no. Deal with the monster.
Well, what if they're falling in love with the monster?
Yeah, we just
Well,
discussed.
then that's a completely different genre.
Oh my god, wait. Who here hasn't heard of the I Fucked Cthulhu song?
Oh god, I
Is that
have
the
heard this.
Mothman one?
I actually don't think I have.
Oh my
I
god.
have not either.
Oh
Well,
my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
I have literally brought this up in chat before and caused chaos.
You sent it to me.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know. When I saw your TikTok today, I scrolled up just a tiny little bit and I was like, oh god, it's right there.
I'm putting it in smut.
Marie-Soleil, a closing point.
We talked about 50 Shades of Grey and how that is unhealthy BDSM relationships, and I would like to see some actual like healthy BDSM kind of dynamics. Because what we have is not like there's 50 Shades of Grey, there's 365 days, or the ones I can name off the top of my head, and they're very much unhealthy. For those of you who don't know, 365 days is a mafia boss kidnaps her and tells her that she has a year to fall in love with him, and basically holds her hostage for an entire year.
That's Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's romance, I guess.
Apparently to some authors.
There's like some people I'm very concerned about, honestly.
Let me unmute. Let me unmute. Yes. I was going to bring up 365 Days as well, because there's that one scene that I find absolutely hilarious where he has her like chained up to a bed and he's like, look what you're missing out on. And he brings in a prostitute and he sits in a chair across from the bed and lets the prostitute have a blowjob. And that's supposed to be the temptation.
Oy.
Oh my
Also, she gets pregnant by the end, by the way.
Disgusting.
Well, that's going to leave a sour taste in my mouth. But until then, with all that being said, I think we're good. Anyone want to say any more, or shall we close out? Let's close out for tonight. So, thanks everybody for listening in. We are the Ink Guild on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Our main home is on YouTube and Spotify, but you can also connect with us individually through our own social media. Check out our Wix if you want to learn more about us, and keep an eye out for more podcasts and other creative projects. Do a closing segment, bracket, close bracket. Well then, thanks again for listening, everyone. Have a good night.
We're also on Tumblr.
Also on Tumblr.
Come hang out with me on Tumblr. I'm lonely.
Don't come hang out with me. Cut the recording. Hurry up, I'm getting weird.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Night. I'm ready to talk about Chuck Tingle. I am so ready. You have no idea.
Already gotten people blushing, and I don't even know if he started recording yet. Let's do this shit.
Wait, a quick question. Does my... Oh my god, fucking Jesus.
You all right there, dude?
Fucking Jesus. I didn't know one of your examples was biblical. Let's go.
Don't get me started on the Jesus fanfiction. I just wanted to check if my headphone mic is okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
now we
you
need to get
got
started on the Jesus fanfiction. What the
We're not.
That Jesus fanfic, boys. Oh my god.
Dean, are you saying you haven't read Jesus fan fiction?
Dean, what the fuck have you been reading?
you know this is a good Christian erotica chat?
I was gonna say, isn't that just all of the Bible?
Yes.
Oh my.
Actually, though, straight up, I have read 2 different, I wouldn't say Jesus fanfics, but 2 different fantasy retellings of different main stories in the Bible, just with the names changed, and I didn't realize it off the start. I was just reading and was like, this is an okay fantasy book. Great. And then it hits me with a hardcore God allegory, and I throw the book away.
You guys ever heard of the Bible as a manga? And I'm serious. Someone decided to adapt all of the, at least the New Testament or Jesus' story as a manga.
All right.
Y'all ever heard of fucking Veggie Tales?
Oh my god, yes. I love Veggie Tales. So, you ready for some ultimate heresy? Jesus's 12 apostles are just his harem.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
It's canon.
It's now canon.
It's canon.
It's canon.
It's canon.
Judas is the Sundere.
Genuinely, the amount of Jesus Judas fan fictions that exist in the world is it's something. That's all I'm saying on that topic.
First topic for the whole chat before we get into the real stuff. Is Judas a Sundere or a Yandere?
I don't know what those terms mean.
So, in anime and manga, Tsundere and Yandere are forms of...
Are we really going into this?
Yes, are usually a high school girl who is in love with a male, either student or teacher, depending, and have various ways of showing affection. A tsundere usually acts as if they do not like the actual object of their affection, going so far as to sometimes even bully them, whereas a yandere is more crazed and will often kill other people who have affection for their current attraction. Have I summed up enough?
Are we talking
the object of their affection too?
Also true.
Is it
true?
Wait, are we talking Jesus or Judas?
Judas.
I want to lean more. It's hard to say. It's hard.
See, with how Judas ends up, getting Jesus killed, I would go to say he's a yandere.
Yeah, and that he also dies afterwards, doesn't he?
He kills himself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to lean towards yandere as well.
Yeah, I'll say I'll third that.
I don't think he ever I haven't actually read this part of the Bible myself, but I feel like he doesn't ever hide his affection or whatever, right?
Yeah.
He's not mean to Jesus.
He kisses him on the cheek.
Which, let's not get into the implications of that one. However, I now want to play Yandere Simulator and mod it so that it around. And the attractive. Yeah, I'm gonna mod it so that I'm gonna mod it so that Senpai is Jesus and you're walking around as Judas.
Are there 12 No, there's only 10 rivals. So would you be adding 2 more rivals or
why not?
Just stab one twice.
All the school teachers are actually Roman legionnaires walking around. Hold on.
The thing you need to remember is that at least 2 of the rivals in the base game are teachers, so
true.
Wait, what are we talking about? I thought we were talking about the Bible. What happened?
We're talking about an adaptation of the Bible.
What?
Just casual heresy, you know how it
You
is.
have the podcast without me. I'm gonna go have a bath.
You keep threatening this.
What do you think I'm gonna do when you're doing the erotica night?
Listen in intently.